Thank you. This is really a group of kindred spirits. It's not all of that usual that occurs. And to show you how tight it is, we actually, the photograph that you can see at the top of that image, the second image is the EcoSmart house in Montana. And we used Uponor products in there. And we also used the same energy company that Ted Turner's foundation used in Montana to do the project. So it's with great pleasure that I sort of focus my talk on building on what you've heard this morning and this afternoon already. Rather than repeat anything, let's assume that we're all together on what we've heard so far. And the issues that I'd like to focus on for a few minutes are the ones that are more unique to what we're doing in our work. And I'll start with the first image up there on the left. In 1977, I was called to a meeting at NASA, Ames Research Center, to talk about being on a team that was working on designing the space station. And I had someone last night say, well, why would they have an architect get involved in the space station? And this is really a critical issue I see in all of our talks today. It is really important to know how to build teams. I mean, Green Builder certainly is really good at that. Putting together this conference is just, it's a real pleasure and an honor to be involved in it. But also, NASA knew they were vehicle designers. You don't think about it that way, but until they started looking at the space station, they were just shooting people up in the air in rockets that had to remain in their seats for a period of time. But as soon as they needed to have an environment where people were involved in a space that wasn't just a seat, they said, maybe we should get some architects involved in that. And I thought that was a wonderful opportunity to get involved, and we were very, very surprised and pleased with that. The other thing is, they know how to build teams. They know how to pull together experts in a variety of areas, and this is so important to, if you hear the messages that were given today, this isn't about one person doing something and having sort of that 20th century Queen Bee approach where Frank Lloyd Wright did this or Bucky Fuller did that. There are teams of people working on all these projects, and they always have been. So I think what we see today in this room and with the speakers is how important it is for us to know how to build teams. The other element I would mention, because of all of the things mentioned so far in the other presenters' talks, there's already been allusion to perhaps we can learn something from other countries. There's probably things we can teach them. It's more than about just not invented here or not invented by our country. I'll mention that briefly because the third image is of a smart village in in Germany, where they had a biogas project where they used the agricultural waste and the to create methane, which then powered a generator, which then created electricity and distributed hot water. That village, since I've been there, has now gotten to the point of where they're creating 5 times the amount of energy that the village needs, and they're funding their own projects with the excess revenues that they're getting from the success of what they're doing. Now, when I was over there, they said, oh, it's too bad you can't do that in the United States. And I thought, what do you mean we can't do that in the United States? We should be able to do that. And we've already heard some things from Jeremy Rifkin, and we'll probably hear some things from Paul Hawken, and also from the governor, in regard to what we need to do. So the second message, and in addition to working on teams, the second message I have today is all about the teams have to include government, both elected officials and people who are employed by the government, business, and academia. We really have assets that we can implement much better than we have up until today. I remember in the 80s, we had a conference and we invited people from the building industry, And they said, isn't that cheating if you actually share information between the government and business and academia? And it was such an interesting reaction to us using our own information that our country invests in for the improvement of our country, where the Japanese and the Germans and other countries had no problem with that. And so I think if there's anybody who's feeling like, well, wait a minute, we shouldn't be doing that, let's try to figure out ways to have people feel comfortable moving ahead. Because we've heard from government, we've heard from business, we've heard from academia. We all need to be working together. We do not need to triplicate the effort and then keep it in silos so the other groups don't know what we're doing. And that's a really clear message from the work that I'm doing. Thank you. This is a picture, and I mention it because people have mentioned farms and technology. The key to understanding innovative technology and design in the service of creating maintaining and improving the quality of life for humans is sometimes easier to see in an example like agriculture, where some of this equipment was dangerous. My father was born and raised on a farm. They were looking forward to improvements of technology being applied to their industry. And I remember in 1995, I read an article that NASA was looking at how to use satellites to control threshing machines on farms in the United States. And I went, yeah, right. 2 years ago, I met someone who has a very, very large ranch in Montana. And so I thought I would just sort of try out my knowledge, see if it would work. I said, what's your overlap on your threshers? He goes, what do you mean? And I said, well, your overlap on your threshing machines. He goes, 2 to 3 inches. I said, oh, so you're using satellites? He's looking at me like, well, where are you from? And so I said, what was it when you had a human running the thresher? And he said, 3 to 5 feet. And I said, what kind of efficiencies are you getting out of that? And we talked about it a little while, and he went from being very skeptical about talking to me to saying, I'd like to invite you to my ranch farm and let you sit on the thresher. You can listen to the FM radio and adjust the air conditioning, but you can't steer it. Humans are not really good at that, as we're finding from another project that we worked on at NASA, had to do with remote control driving of I was working on the Mars lander, the rover, and they were looking at ways to independently control the rover. And then recently, I spent 8 years up in Montana. I came back to Silicon Valley, and someone said to me, well, you know what they did with all the technology on your rover project, don't you? And I went, what do you mean? He goes, well, the algorithms, everything that was developed for that project, they're in the Google self-driving car. And I thought, well, this is really interesting. That's more than I was expecting even, because we really have so many assets that were developed, whether it's in Silicon Valley, whether it's in Florida. And I mentioned the first meeting that we had with NASA that I was called to. The other people in the meeting was Disney Imagineers and Lucasfilms, and it was 2 months before Star Wars came out. And if you think of UCF and what's going on in Orlando, and those are familiar names. And if you look at the dynamics of the research that's going on at UCF, in addition to the Siemens lab that we're going to see tomorrow afternoon, it's a dynamic that is recognizably pleasant. And I hope to further my involvement with UCF after this visit here this week. We know how the technology has affected our cities, and we hear a lot about everybody's moving to the city. That was an issue that came up a couple of years ago. One interesting fact in regard to technology and it affecting the building industry, which is my main focus, is that someone was talking about the advancement of technology in history earlier in buildings. There was a point in time where we had the ability to design taller buildings using steel and iron than 6 stories, but people didn't want to walk above 6 stories in a building. And so until Mr. Otis developed the safety passenger elevator. All of a sudden, it's the dynamics of two types of technology. It's not always about just one technology advancing history, advancing human development. It's having the broader view. It's having government and business and academia working together on this. Because I've had projects, I had a project stopped in 1979 because the local town didn't allow gray water systems. They said they were illegal. So I pulled that off. And then the federal government changed, and they removed all of the investment tax credits for photovoltaics and solar hot energy. So we need the government to be on the team, and we need to work successfully with the government so that we can accomplish what we need to talk about that has been mentioned in this room today by every single speaker. That is something that is imperative. Whether it's a town, whether it's a city, whether it's a home, these are all 4 projects and different aspects of it. I went to India to travel around and to India is like everything that you can imagine. It isn't poor India, it isn't rich India, it is amazing. This is the presidential palace where we were asked what we were doing there and what we wanted to accomplish. We met with the chief minister of Andhra Pradesh, which is like the governor of the state of California. And they have, what they told us, we were there to do a smart cities project, and they said, Terry, we need smart villages for the following reason. There are 1.3 billion people in India. If they all move to the cities, it's going to collapse our cities, it'll collapse our villages, it'll collapse my state. We need to give people the option. If they want to stay in the villages, what do they need? And so we started looking at the quality of life that is needed in a village to give people the option of staying there. And we found some things that have been identified today as well. People want to have economic opportunity, they want to have educational opportunities, and they want to have entertainment. Those are the 3 big E's that allow us to move ahead. And that's true whether it's in your house, whether it's in your town and village, or whether it's in a city. So those are some of the common quality of life improvements. And we know the technology is coming along. I don't think that's necessarily the issue or the problem. This is Mumbai, used to be Bombay. And you can see these are people from villages that have moved to the city. If you saw Slumdog Millionaire, you get a sense of what that's like. I've learned a lot about how, don't just feel sorry and avert your eyes when you see poor people in India. It's like, try to understand what's going on. Because all of these people, they have their own little businesses, and they're very successful. And so when we went into the village, we asked the weavers what their issues were, what their problems were, and we came up with the idea of having a website so they could sell their products internationally. We worked with the shrimp farmers and how to use sensors to determine the oxygen level of the shrimp ponds that they have. And they could monitor them remotely. So a lot of this stuff is like you're going, wait a minute, they're doing things in India that we're not doing in the United States yet. And so that sort of builds on, this is an architecture school. We had a hackathon there where we just said, come up with solutions for your country. And it was like an incredible number of young people that were just energized about working on their country. We have the same issues in the San Francisco area. In California, it's not just climate that we're denying. There's a community of 600 people in California that cannot drink the water they're provided by the government. They have to bring in bottled water. We found 300 more communities like that. There are over 1 million people in California that can't drink the water. You mentioned some things about water quality. We can't just say, oh, that's poor India, that's their problem. India, when I was in India, the floods were happening in West Virginia, in Maryland, in Florida, in Texas, and they're going, oh, poor United States, you guys really have it tough. And so to get that kind of reaction, some of the people that are now being innovative and starting to look at communities, this is a Facebook project that is, they've already done a world headquarters building. Now they're looking at bringing housing and shopping and things into their area. This is one near a transportation center in San Jose by Google. They have 100 acres that they're going to be developing. And this other, my final point was made earlier, but it's really about, if you're looking at the Internet of Things, just remember this one thing, and I'm an architect, so I'm going to say this all the time. The biggest thing in the Internet of Things is a building. In other words, if you're trying to figure out, how am I going to design something that'll fit on this, just look around you. As architects, we have this much space to do what we're trying to do on these things, or at least supplement or complement them. So I leave you with a question: what is it that each of us can do, whether you're a plumber, a carpenter, an academic, with the government, in a business situation? What are you going to do in the next year to contribute to the success of us all working together to address the issues of quality of life and technology and design? Thank you very much.